concession speech from Donald Trump. If we know one thing, it's that he's a very sore loser. That said, the nightmare scenario of blood on the streets or a showdown in the U.S. Supreme Court probably won't come to pass.
The Environment Secretary says Mr Biden's victory in the election makes no difference at all to Brexit. Back in September, the Democrat voiced concern about the impact of the UK's exit from the EU on peace in Northern Ireland. George Eustice has denied that a second term for Donald Trump, who was in favour of Brexit, would have been a better result for Boris Johnson's government.
We've left the European Union. We voted to leave in 2016. Any president, including Joe Biden, will obviously recognise that they need to respect democratic results in other countries. And we've already left the EU, so it's happened.
People in Wales are being urged to limit their contact with others despite the end of the firebreak lockdown after more than a fortnight. It's been replaced with new measures which apply to the whole country. Our reporter Daniel Bevan is in Caerphilly, an area which has faced tougher restrictions for longer.
People here in Caerphilly haven't been able to leave their borough without a reasonable excuse for 2 months. This morning that changes as Wales's firebreak comes to an end. Non-essential retail and hospitality businesses can reopen for the first time in 17 days, and people living in Wales can move freely throughout the country.
The number of positive COVID-19 cases worldwide has now passed 50 million. The figure is tracked by Johns Hopkins University in the US. More than 1.2 million people have died from the disease across the globe. 250,000 workers in the UK will benefit from a rise in what's known as the real living wage. The voluntary rate set by the Living Wage Foundation is going up by 10p in London to £10.55 an hour. Across the rest of the UK, it's increasing to £9.50, a rise of 20 pence. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was up 76 points at 59.86, and the pound buys $1.31 and €1.10. The weather, cloudy with showers for most, heaviest in the southwest of England and South Wales later. A few bright spells elsewhere, mostly in the far north, and a mild day, a high of 16 degrees. From Global's newsroom, I'm Simon Conway.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Yeah, good morning to you all. It's 3 minutes after 9 on Monday, the 9th of November. Acutely aware that many of you, of course, tune in to hear Sir Keir Starmer and put your calls, which you will in one moment. Just before, though, well, of course, I welcome Sir Keir.
Morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming along, Keir. You have a big piece in one of the newspapers today in The Guardian, so obviously listeners can go out and learn more. I know you don't write the headline, but it is headlined, "We must stand with the US on the world stage." Given what we understand to be President-elect Biden's views of the current Brexit deal as what it means to the Northern Ireland Peace Accord, Sir Keir, how easy is it going to be to stand alongside at the world stage?
I think it will be easy. I think the values that we share as a country with America are embodied in Biden, and this sense of bringing people together, and I think people really are fed up with division, and he brings that. I think he brings a degree of clarity on Brexit, actually, because he's very strong on the Good Friday Agreement. And I think as we go into the final few days of the negotiation, just a bit of focus on that might actually help both sides. And because we do want a deal, and I think a deal's possible. But I think the fact that we know exactly where he stands on that actually helps the process. And I hope it does.
Even though clearly he's no signed-up fan of the idea. I mean, with Brexit is done, as you've so said, there's no point refighting that one. But he still thinks, colloquially, we're probably nuts to have done it.
Well, he believes that, I mean, this is the big difference, really, isn't it? He believes that on the world stage, you pull countries together, you cooperate and build bridges. And that's the opposite, in a sense, of what Donald Trump felt, America first. So that's the big values difference. But on the question, I mean, of course, he had his views on whether Brexit is a good idea or a bad idea. We left, Brexit's happening, notwithstanding whatever view we all took, and my view was well known. But the question now is, can we get a deal in these final few days? And I I really hope we can. The Prime Minister promised it. He needs to deliver it. But some clarity on the Good Friday Agreement actually helps there, because both sides now go into the Monday morning negotiation knowing that the will be President of the US takes a view on the Good Friday Agreement, and that there shouldn't be anything other than the border as it is in between North and South in Ireland.
Mike, coming to you in a moment. Final point, tactically, Sir Keir, as what the Democrats have achieved in the US, if we can use blue walls and red walls and everything, you know where I'm going with this. What do you take from that, you and your colleagues?
I think there's a lesson there for the Labour Party about coalition building and looking to people who haven't voted Labour and listening and engaging in a different way. And this is something I think is very important for the Labour Party now, which is for all political parties, but particularly for mine, which is when people don't vote for you, you don't look at them and say, you're wrong. You actually look at them and say, can we have a discussion? Because if we lost an election as badly as we did last December, we need to look at ourselves rather than the electorate. And I do think there's something about coalition building here and bringing people together. And I think, particularly in light of COVID-19, people are desperate for that sense of coming together now.
Let's go to those calls. Thanks, Sir Keir. Mike's in Newham. Mike, you're through to Keir Starmer. Go ahead. Morning.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Keir. I would just like to say quickly first that I actually voted for you in the leadership campaign, and I was actually a big fan, and I have to say I'm a bit disappointed because I was a Corbyn supporter, and I voted for you because I thought you would carry on the same unity. And I'm actually, like I said, I'm a bit disappointed. I've just got two quick questions. I was just going to say, regarding the suspension of Corbyn, I believe it was a political decision, as the EHRC report permits Labour Party members to express an opinion on internal party matters, such as the scale of anti-Semitism within the party based on experience and within the law. So I just want...
Mike, can you hear me, Mike? While we try and get you back, Mike, let's put part one. The decision made as regards Jeremy Corbyn, Sir Keir, was a political decision. Keir Starmer.
Mike, thank you for coming on. I hope you can hear me.
We'll try and get him back, I promise.
Yeah. I mean, look, a couple of things, Mike. I was very clear when I stood for leadership of the Labour Party that I wanted to bring unity to our party to stop the factional fighting, and I absolutely want to do that. I was also clear that we would tackle anti-Semitism. And for me, that meant dealing with those who are anti-Semitic and say or do things that are anti-Semitic, but also those that pretend it's exaggerated, it doesn't really exist, it's only factional. And both of those things have to be tackled. And that's what we're determined to do in light of the Commission report. It's quite something when an Equality and Human Rights Commission, which was set up by a Labour government, finds the Labour Party in breach of the law that a Labour government passed. And in those circumstances, I think it's very important to take tough decisions. It wasn't a political decision. It was a decision of the General Secretary. But I'm not shied away. I completely support that decision.
We've got Mike back. Mike, put your second question, if you would.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the second question...
Mike, we lost you, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. So the second question,
Yes,
my sister actually works in a secondary school, and evidence shows that the highest rates of transmissions of COVID-19 happen in schools. So my question is, why have you gone against the science and the unions by supporting Boris Johnson in keeping the schools open and putting thousands of lives at risk?
Mike, thank you for raising that. I have, you're absolutely right, I have supported keeping our schools open because I think the long-term harm to children, particularly vulnerable children, in being kept out of school for months on end is huge.
But what about harm to teachers, potentially?
We need to make schools safe. We can do that by the way we arrange schools. A lot of schools and staff have done an amazing job, by the way, in what they've done in schools, in how they've set the schools up, how they keep them safe. But if we closed out, when we've already had schools closed for many, many months over the summer, if we close them again, it means that children, particularly vulnerable children, will be at home not learning. The attainment gap, the gap between those that are going to do well and those that aren't, goes up and up and up. And so these children will live with this for years and years and years. So I think the challenge is to keep our schools open. Now, what I said...
the unions are saying the staff's lives, of course, could be affected if they get COVID, Sir Keir.
Yeah,
you have to balance... Are the unions wrong?
No, of course, we have to minimise the risk to everybody, but we also have to recognise that we need to keep our schools open and we need to make it safe. Now, Mike, what I would just say, just because I think it's important, is once the virus started to get out of control again, which was a number of weeks ago, I said do an early circuit break, a 2 or 3 week shutdown, and do it over half term because if you can get control of the virus more easily if your schools are shut. And we had an opportunity there where all schools pretty much were closed for at least a week. Some private schools for 2 weeks. If you'd done the lockdown we're now in a few weeks ago, you could have done it when the schools were shut. And that was a huge mistake by the government not to have taken that opportunity.
Let's come to other calls. Mike, thank you. Ranald is in Oxford. You're on the radio, Ranald. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Ranald.
Good morning, Sir Keir. I run a small group of restaurants dedicated to live music called Boysdale. The 10 p.m. curfew is very damaging to the hospitality industry generally, and especially so for Boysdale and other live music venues. As a result, we are financially hit much harder and employ far less musicians. For public health, the validity of crowding everyone onto public transport at 10 p.m. is, to say the least, counterintuitive. Would you agree with Sadiq Khan that after the lockdown, the 10 p.m. curfew should be scrapped?
Randall, I'm really glad you've raised that. I do think we get the chance to look again at the 10 p.m. curfew. I can understand what the government was trying to achieve, to be honest, but it didn't work. And we saw people crowding out at 10 o'clock. There's a smarter way of doing this. And I think that if you were to stagger that time differently, so people left at different times, it would be far better. Now, when this came up in Parliament for us to vote on 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a straight up, what we call an up-down vote, which is you either vote for it or you vote against it. And a vote against it means
you can't cherry pick.
You can't cherry pick and you can't change it. But I think lots of people, and in fact, a number of Tory MPs think that this needs to be reviewed. And so I think there's a lot of work for the government to do in this 4-week period, but it needs to think about the regime in place when we come out of lockdown, and where things have not really worked very well, they've got the opportunity. And we'll, if they come up with something sensible, we'll work with them on it.
And to Ranald's central point, the idea of staggering whatever it might be, you would support that?
Yeah, in Wales, Ranald, they did that, where they staggered the exit time. They also smartly closed the off licences at 10 o'clock at the same time, because what was happening in various parts across England was people coming out the pub, going straight to the off licence, and that was making people stay around in the city squares for longer. So they did actually have a much smarter approach in Wales. So it's possible, I think, to do something better. And Ranald, I really hope that this is better for your business, because it is really difficult in your sector. I do completely understand that.
Quick one-sentence response, Ranald.
How quickly do you think this could happen? Because obviously we need time to plan on live music and entertainment. We can't just instantaneously turn it on.
No, we've got 3 weeks more, of course, of lockdown in England.
3 weeks more. Ranald, my concern is that we start thinking about the 2nd of December now, what the regime will be when we come out, and the government needs to do that. The other thing it needs to do is it's got to fix test, trace and isolate. And I know I'm like a broken record on this, but if you don't test people, you can't trace them. If you're not tracing them, you can't isolate. And I think it was 3 weeks ago, the last week for any figures, 130,000 people who should have been self-isolating hadn't even been contacted. You can't really control a virus if that bit of the system is broken. And so that's why I've said to the Prime Minister, use this time you've got 3 weeks left. You have got to fix test, trace and isolate, because it's very difficult to get a managed exit from this without it.
OK, Ranald, thank you. We must move on. Sarah in Ealing. Your question, Sarah. Go ahead.
Hi, Sarah.
Hiya. Just a quick question. Given Biden and Obama's public statements against Brexit and Joe Biden's personal closeness to Ireland, how do you suppose that the UK will be able to get a good trade deal? And if you don't think it is possible, why are your front benchers are so happy that he's won?
Well, look, we're very happy that he's won, because I think the values that he holds are very close to our values, and his political party and our political party have been close for a very, very long time. I actually think, and Joe Biden is a friend of Britain. He's worked with Britain in the past as vice president, and I'm sure that he will want to do a trade deal with us. And we all want to get a good trade deal with America and with many other countries around the world. His clarity, actually, about some of the issues helps in negotiations sometimes when someone is just clear. Point we touched on earlier about things like, what really matters in Northern Ireland, the border. Actually, it helps negotiations because you know where you stand. And what we get in Joe Biden is someone who understands Northern Ireland. I had the great privilege of working in Northern Ireland for 5 years and really understood that for both communities, not having a border is not just a technical matter of, goods and tariffs. It's actually in the heart. It's how do you get two communities that were in real conflict, awful conflict, with many deaths for a very, very long time, to work and live together in peace and not having a border. It's in the heart in Ireland, and Joe Biden understands that, and it's very important, I think.
All right, Sarah, thank you. Nick in Slough, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Keir. Keir, if your party was in power, if you were Prime Minister, how would you be handling the migrant crisis that we've seen worsen over the last few months? It's estimated thousands and thousands will come since lockdown alone, and only a very tiny, small percentage are successfully sent back because they discarded their IDs. How would you be handling it different from Boris and Priti Patel, if you would handle it different at all?
Yeah, I think the most important thing would be working internationally in a different way, and particularly with France. I think it's really important that we solve these. These are desperate cases. We've got to have a humane response. Nobody wants to see families getting into dinghies or other boats to try and get across the channel. Nobody wants to see that. That is desperate on any views.
Respectfully, Sir Keir, I could have heard Priti Patel say what you've just said. I could hear Boris Johnson. We need to work closely with the French. We need to stop it. I think what Nick is looking for, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, is something tangibly different. You would do... Nick, is that fair, what your question is?
It is, yeah, because what I'm seeing, along with many other British people, is they're being escorted in, put in 4-star hotels, no less, or the latest being put in the barracks, whilst we're seeing our own homeless people out in the streets, many ex-armed forces. Okay. So I think there should be a different play on this.
Well, okay, I mean, just for a point, I don't think they go to 4-star hotels. I think in some instances they do go to lodges and other accommodation. But I hear what you're saying. So let's hear again. Maybe you want to say, I don't know. You want to say, I'd need to work with my colleagues and work with the French and work it out. Sir Keir.
No, Nick, let me take that head on, because I've been over to the camps in northern France, and they're really shocking places to be. What I propose is that we work practically with the French authorities to help people process claims if they've got claims, and to start sorting them out.
You mean build a centre?
You could do it in France. You need to have safe passage for... I mean, sometimes there are children things that have got relatives here. You need to have a system in place, but you need practical work here to get it going. And, to some extent, let me push back on the government. People forget, they have been in power for 10 years. And therefore, if there are failings, the government's got to take responsibility for them.
Nick, thank you. Rosa in Woking. Rosa, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead.
Hello, Sir Keir. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you, Rosa.
Good stuff. So I wanted to take it back to lockdown again.
Yeah.
Last week I shut my hairdressing salon despite it being super COVID safe. And in fact, stage research shows that my industry only contributes 0.5% to the R rate. I want to know, why do you support a lockdown that's so damaging for business and workers, especially in one of our most busiest periods of the year?
Well, Rosa, look, firstly, can I just say I'm really sorry to hear that, and it must be really hard, because I know you and others have done so much to make workplaces COVID safe. The sad reality is the government lost control of the virus, and the infection rate is going up across the whole of England. And what that means is the number of cases is doubling every so many days, and it can be 7, sometimes it can be 10 or 14, but it's doubling. That means the number of people with infections is going up, number of people going into hospitals, sadly those that are dying in hospitals, is going to go up. And so if you don't bring it under control, we call it the R rate, if the R rate is over 1, it means that doubling will continue. And there comes a point where the NHS will be overwhelmed, hundreds and then thousands of people will be dying on a daily basis, and nobody wants to see that. And the tough thing then is to do something about it, which is to have some sort of lockdown or shutdown. What I was proposing, Rosa, was what we called a circuit break weeks ago, which would have got the virus at a much earlier stage, and then you could have hopefully done it in 2 to 3 weeks.
We are where we are.
Well, we are. No, I know.
And you and your party supported closing down a hairdresser's in Woking to help keep people in Nottingham alive. How does that work?
Well, Nick, let me just tackle that head on, because there is no area, sadly, in England where the infection rate wasn't going up. And I know it was going up more quickly in some areas than others. But everywhere, at one stage, I think Cornwall and the Isle of Wight were the only areas where the infection rate was under 1.
But some of that evidence, was more than 3 weeks old when it was presented on the eve of Halloween. And others of it was selected from 29 hospitals in England, more than 400 hospitals. It was very selective. And we read today that reportedly Boris Johnson is furious. He feels he was bounced into it by dodgy data. Sir Keir, which Theresa May referred to, indeed.
Well, Theresa May did refer to it just as Boris Johnson had walked out on her, which wasn't very dignified, I didn't think, on his part. But, I mean, I actually concentrate more on rather than the projections, on the numbers. If you look at the numbers, if you track it from early September through to where we are now, and this, Rosa, is the actual cases rather than projections. I'm afraid, the deaths that were 11... On the day that Sage advised that a circuit break would be a good idea, 11 people died that day from COVID. Now we're into the 300s. There was just nearly 500 the other day. I know it fluctuates, but you can see that that's not a projection. That's what's happened. On the 21st of September, number of deaths 11. Last week, the highest number, touching on 500. That is looking at what's actually happened rather than projections. And it's really tough, Rose. I completely understand that you're probably, tearing your hair out at the consequences of this. That's why there needs to be proper support for businesses such as yourself, and we need to acknowledge that people have gone over and above to make their places COVID safe.
And on the subject of support, you will be aware there's around 3 million people, Sir Keir, who feel they've been left out. They may well be hairdressers, they're driving instructors, and in Rishi Sunak's, I think, 6 different attempts at it and 14 different statements, those who were left behind in March are still left behind, Sir Keir, people such as hairdressers and driving instructors. Sir Keir.
They're furious, and they're right to be furious. Now, I can understand if you're trying to put a scheme in place very quickly in March, that you might make a mistake, you might overlook people, there are gaps. It is unforgivable now that those same people have been overlooked again, and the government urgently needs to address that, along with freelance and others who've just not had the opportunity to have the support that others have had. And you can't ask people to go into lockdown with all those consequences and not put hand in hand with that lockdown the economic support they need. So on the excluded, the nearly 3 million people, I say to the government, again, you have got to deal with this gap and do something about it.
I mean, just Rosa, good luck with your business as and when it returns. Be sure to call me. Notwithstanding the figures you quoted, and you and I will agree, one is too many. It was 156 COVID deaths yesterday. So again, with these numbers fluctuating, are you not concerned about the sheer bluntness, if there is such a word, of the measures that you and your party supported?
Well, Nick, just one quick point, and this, I accept this goes both ways. The Sunday figures are always lower because of the reporting over the weekend. I think the average is running at a higher rate than 156. And one death is too many. But if you don't get it under... this is, for those that say don't have any lockdown, any restrictions, they have to answer the question, which is, if, let's say, the average is 300, that is 600 in 2 weeks. And if that 600 becomes 1,200 2 weeks after,
you're just doing maths now.
No, but that is if you
that's
look.
What the scientists, that's what some of the advisors do. That's just maths.
It's worth, if you track it back to the 21st of September, you can see the doubling every few weeks. So not the forecast. Now, those that say don't have a lockdown, and nobody wants a lockdown, nobody have to answer the question, what is the number of deaths that you would stop at and say, well, hang on, this has gone a bit far now. And what are you going to do about the NHS hospitals and when they're overwhelmed?
You and your colleagues have voted for a package of measures that if I had a wife, I can sleep with her, but I can't play tennis with her.
I heard you put that to somebody earlier
and you thought, oh, God, what am I going to say to him?
I was listening on the way. Look, I mean, it's a perfectly... I thought it's an excellent example, if I may say so.
Well, you can use it if you like. You can use it courtesy of me.
And there are those inconsistencies. I mean, it absolutely highlights those inconsistencies. It's why... we really ought to have had more time in Parliament to scrutinise the regulations. This all happened in a hurry. There was a rushed press conference last Saturday, and we then had a bit of time on Monday to debate this. There should have been more time. And also, this is something that goes round and round. I think that our allowing Parliament to amend some of these things would be a good idea, because actually on something like that, or other examples, I think quite a majority in Parliament might say, well, actually, that doesn't really make much sense. We can fix this now. And the problem we have, Rosa and others, is, in Parliament, you get the chance to vote for or against the restrictions. You can't amend them. But these inconsistencies need to be ironed out. Actually, I think the government could iron some of them out if they in the next few weeks if they wanted to.
All right. Rosa, thank you. Sean's in Newport. Sean, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Sean.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi, my question is this. The First Minister imposed a firebreak in Wales, but many feel that they hurt businesses. Does Labour intend to call for a series of circuit breakers next year across the UK if the Welsh one is seen to be effective?
Well, I hope not. And Sean, it's really important. I mean, nobody wants to do this. No, we voted for the restrictions in Parliament last week. I didn't want to do that. I didn't come into Parliament to vote to close down businesses or to vote for sports areas to be closed down. Nobody wants to do that, but these are tough decisions. What the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, did in Wales was to get in early with the firebreaker. So he got in when the infection rates were lower than in England and put a circuit breaker in. He also was smart enough to take advantage of half term. So he had schools shut for the period of firebreak. Now, I hope that that works. Sean, the numbers will become clear over the next couple of weeks because there's a lag. Will it have to be repeated? I hope not, but I don't think I can hand on heart say definitely not, because we know we came out of lockdown earlier this year, and over the summer months things looked as though the numbers were pretty low, but then come September they took off again. We need to be much more careful coming out next time, by the way, and I think the Prime Minister just needs to be less cavalier about how we come out.
You once said that the way that they operated in Welsh, the Labour government, was an example of Labour in power. To the week ending 6th of November, the case rate per 100,000 in Wales is 286 per 100,000. In England, it's 231.8. In fact, Welsh is worse. Why is that an example of Labour in power?
Well, because I think what you have to do is you get in quickly with a fire break, circuit break, call it what you like. The numbers lag, as we all know. It takes about a week for symptoms to develop. About 2 weeks before someone's admitted to hospital, if they sadly are. So there is a lag of a couple of weeks. We need to watch that figure. And we all have to learn. I hope that it works. Everybody desperately hopes that it works, because then Wales can ease the restrictions and everybody wants to get back to a degree of normality, and we can learn lessons for England.
The Welsh Labour government is still an example of Labour in power, to which my view
yes, it is. Yes. Look. Yes, it is. They got in early with that fire break. I mean, in a sense, the Prime Minister said, we don't need a circuit break, we don't need lockdowns, the last thing we need. And then 3 weeks later, he did a U-turn and then imposed the lockdown that we were arguing for 3 weeks ago. So it's not that he avoided it magically. He's now in it, but for longer.
On the subject of U-turns, I can't let you go without a word on the decision concerning the campaigning done second time out by Marcus Rashford, Sir Keir. The decision that was £170 million made available yesterday.
Just astonishing. The government 3 weeks ago votes against free school meals. Marcus Rashford scores another. I think it's Rashford 2, government 0. Another U-turn. And on, I think the humbling effect of seeing local authorities, local charities providing the meals that the government wouldn't provide over half term was really something that was felt very, very deeply. Well done, Marcus. I'm an Arsenal fan, but well done, Marcus Rashford. I think the last thing I'd say is this. In a pandemic, nobody expects a government to get everything right. And to have U-turns or corrections, if there are one or two of them, you might well say, well, fair enough. But I think we're on number 15 and counting. And that, for me, smacks of incompetence.
Chris in Dundee might be the last question. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Sir Keir.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, I'm a self-employed photographer, one of the 3 million excluded, unfortunately. Our particular industry has been devastated, as you know. The wedding industry itself is worth $14 billion a year, and it's taken a £5.6 billion hit this year. There's many other self-employed, limited companies, directors, 3 million of us that have fallen through the cracks. I know you've already slightly touched on it, but I wonder if you can give us a commitment today to maybe personally speak to Rishi Sunak and try and get something for us, because our businesses are falling, absolutely falling and crashing each day.
There are many people who won't have a Christmas, you're aware, or whatever celebration they have, Sir Keir.
Chris, I'll give you that commitment. We've raised it before. I'll do it again on the back of your call in this morning on LBC. You're absolutely right. For photographers and others, this has been absolutely devastating. And as I said, to fall through the cracks back in March was bad enough, but to still not have the support you need is not acceptable. So, Chris, I'll take that away as a result of your phone call and redouble our efforts and go back to the Chancellor again.
A couple of final points from me. The head of the government's vaccine task force has charged taxpayers £670,000 for a team of PRs. This amount of money has been spent since June with 8 full-time consultants. Kate Bingham is whom I speak. Sir Keir.
That can't be justified. And I heard the government minister on your show earlier this morning trying to dodge that question, but I think he knew. From his tone, you could tell in his heart of hearts he'd been pushed out by the government to defend the line, but he couldn't. You can't justify that. And when you get Rosa and Chris and others coming on the line explaining what's happened to their hair salon or their photography, you cannot justify that sort of money being spent. If only it was the only example. There are lots of examples of lucrative contracts going without any due process, and I think the public mood on this is very, very clear.
The warning from NHS unions that staff could be leaving in droves unless they get a pay boost. Many have been overworked. They even use the expression burnt out, says some trade union leaders. Sir Keir?
Yeah, I think the government needs to do the decent thing and get round the table and start negotiating on a pay increase for these key workers. They have been absolutely incredible these last few months. They were incredible in the first phase of the pandemic. Don't underestimate the stress they're under now as the numbers are going up.
Are you picking up some might be leaving? Some just say, I just can't put up with this.
People, not so much leaving, but people are really getting stressed again at work, and they're really worried, particularly in the health service, about the number of COVID cases, but also what they're going to do about the regular cases, because they don't want to cancel operations and not care for people. And so the stress levels, which I could see were coming down, my wife works in the NHS, so I've got a line of sight on this. But they did come down a bit over the summer, and there was a bit of sigh of a relief. I'm afraid they're all going back up again.
Understand what your wife does. I'm sorry.
She works in occupational health, right, in the health service.
And so colleagues are now beginning to get stressed as they were earlier in the year.
Yeah, they are getting stressed because there's something incredible about working in the health service. People are there not just because it's a good job that they want to do, but also because of the sense of public service. And when the numbers go up and they worry about how they're going to cope, that does increase stress. I haven't heard so much people wanting to leave. I'm not denying for a minute there probably are people in that camp. I think we just collectively need to say a big thank you and say to the government, get around the negotiating table.
And lastly, I want to come full circle, if I may, back to the conversation we had right at the top concerning Jeremy Corbyn. Len McCluskey, of course, from the Unite Union, your biggest donor, says that it was an act of grave injustice to suspend Mr Corbyn. A response to that, and is it right that you continue to take funding from the union?
Look, Len McCluskey and I speak, we respect each other, we don't always agree. And we don't agree on that, but I have the advantage with Len McCluskey that I talk to him directly, and we have a grown-up relationship where we agree to agree or disagree.
You don't need to talk through me.
You don't need to talk. So, but on the funding,
what have you said to him about that? You just see different points over there.
We'd have different. This is the same with lots of trade union leaders and senior politicians. I like to have a one-to-one relationship where people feel they can tell me what they think. I can agree or disagree, and we can then find a way forward rather than doing it through third parties. And that's the same with all the trade union leaders and with senior members of the Labour Party.
And the Jewish News report last week that Baroness Chakrabarti is thinking of building a legal case against Mr Corbyn's suspension?
Well, I don't think anybody wants to see yet more legal cases. I want to see the Labour Party focused on campaigning to win elections. We've got a massive set of elections next May. We've got a general election in 2024. We absolutely have to be focused on that. So I don't want to see any Labour Party money or time tied up with yet more legal cases.
You tell Baroness probably to stand down, respectfully.
I will talk to Shami about this when I next speak to her.
And finally, you have a month and 1 day to convince the EHRC you have a plan to implement their recommendations. I don't expect you to tell me everything. What are you going to do about that? And what does it mean for Pete Willsman, who's still in the party?
Well, Pete Willsman, his case, I won't comment on the individual case, but we need all of these cases to go through the process quickly.
You haven't got a lot of time. You know the date is November 9.
You raised that case with me last time. It's very important, and every time I come on, I do go away and make sure I do my homework and follow up. On the individual case, it's not right for me. This was one of the major problems to say what I want to happen. But I do require, and I do this, to say I need to know the speed of these cases and what actual measures are we taking to speed them up. We need to continue to do that. On your substantial challenge.
Yeah, we've got a month and a day.
Yeah, we've got a month and a day. We have been anticipating this report. We've done quite a lot of the hard work already, and we'll have that plan on time to the Commission, and then I hope we can sign it off and start working to it, because I think what those who are most pained by our failure to deal with anti-Semitism want is an honest acknowledgement by the Labour Party of the scale of the problem and to see us committed to changing it. And that's the commitment I will give and I will deliver on.
Best wishes to you and your family. Sir Keir, thank you.
Thanks so much.
We're appearing here on LBC, where news is next.
Sir Keir Starmer has told LBC he's sure Joe Biden will want to do a trade deal with the UK. The Labour leader says the US President-elect's clarity on issues including peace in Northern Ireland will help in any negotiations. Mr Biden is appointing a team of coronavirus advisors to help him get the pandemic under control in the US when he takes over in the White House. The current president, Donald Trump, is still yet to concede defeat following the election. Pubs, restaurants and hairdressers in Wales are among the businesses allowed to reopen after the 17-day firebreak lockdown came to an end. It's been replaced with new national measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And the weather, cloudy.